Rashad Samples turning down the Dallas Cowboys to remain with the Oregon Ducks. Man, it is just another example of the precise shade of green the grass is and remains in Eugene. What can we expect from the run game in 2025 and the future? I'm going to break it all down. This is TSO Dub. Welcome to That Show Out West for That Team Out West, an unbiased, neutral observer's view of Oregon Ducks football. I'm Ted LaBrue. This one's all about running the football. This one's all about the running backs, and I'm excited to talk about it because Oregon has a great tradition over the last 20 or so years of great to elite run games. And Oregon has a great to elite run game. Really excited to break it all down. But before we break things down on the offensive side of the football, we got to give some props. We got to give some credit to things that are going down on the defensive side of the football. Co-defensive coordinator and defensive backs coach Chris Hampton was named Recruiter of the Year by 24/7 Sports. And when you look at the haul of defensive backs in this last 25 class, yeah, you can understand why. These 4 DBs that were brought in by Oregon in this last class, all top 65 overall players according to the 24/7 Sports composite. I think when we look back at this defensive backs room and we look back at these 5 guys that are playing on the football field in a couple of years, we're going to look back at this 24 class. We're going to really look back at this 25 class and say, hey, yeah, those were the building blocks of maybe one of the best secondaries in all of college football. I've talked about the secondary really since the launch of this show after New Year's. Look, we're right about at a month, so happy 1-month anniversary to That Show Out West. But I've talked about how this secondary has increasingly been getting better and getting better and getting better, and it needed to get better, and it still needs to get better and better and better under the Dan Lanning regime. And I think a big part of why this thing continues to go in an upward trajectory and why I expect to continue to go in an upward trajectory is the traits and the physical attributes of some of these defensive backs that they're bringing in, not only in recruiting, but in the transfer portal as well. You get guys, Oregon secondaries maybe of the past were a little bit smaller. You get guys that are now getting a little bit bigger. You have guys that are a little bit more physical. And you have guys that are longer as well. Size and length, 2 traits, 2 attributes that are very important to building a great to elite level secondary, and the Oregon Ducks are doing just that. Look, we got great coaches on this Oregon football staff. Dan Lanning has done a phenomenal job. Maybe an underrated part of really what Dan Lanning brings to the table is bringing in really good coaches and a really good staff around him. Chris Hampton doing great things on the defensive side of the ball. You know who's doing great things on the offensive side of the ball? Well, a lot of people, right? Alik Terry on the offensive line. Love what Junior Adams is developing at wide receivers coach. But this one's all about the run game. And this one is all about Rashad Samples, the running backs coach that recently interviewed for the same position, running backs coach with the new Dallas Cowboys under head coach Brian Schottenheimer. He looked around and said, yeah, that grass, that's damn green. I'm going to stay around in Eugene, Oregon. And folks, appreciate what Rashad Samples is giving you right now. Because, he's going to be around for a couple more years. He signs a new deal, looking right around $700K per year over that next 2 years that I just mentioned. But he's not going to be here forever. He is one of the rising stars in this coaching profession. So appreciate him while you still got him. All right, let's kind of break down the impact that Rashad Samples has really brought to Oregon Ducks football. Now, he's been here for 1 year, right? He has been, but he's made an impact in a short period of time in many ways, between the lines and on the trail, certainly as well. You know, you look at the production between the lines, I'm going to give Coach Samp a couple of things here. Once again, in a short period of time that he has been the running backs coach. Jordan James this last season was the highest productive top running back season of the Dan Lanning era, right? More productive than any of the Bucky Irving seasons at Oregon. So, hey, he's certainly got that in his back pocket as well. And one guy that I'm going to be talking about here throughout this show, throughout this podcast, throughout this commentary is Dejon Riggs. I think he's done a really good job. That is a diamond in the rough type of guy. He was a 3-star prospect that was found, and when he was able to get on the field towards the end of the season, you saw the development that took place. And I think he's going to have a much bigger role on this Oregon football team. And you got to think a big part of that development and a big part of that progression and him getting into those situations is because of the coaching and the development from one Rashad Samples. Now, that's the on the field. I think the biggest impact that Rashad has had on this program on the short period of time that he's been around is on the trail. It's on the Oregon trail. It's on the recruiting trail. He has shown tremendous ability. Even before he came to Oregon and he was a part of that SMU staff with Sonny Dykes called Samples, quote, an elite level recruiter. And that was before his 30th birthday. Rashad Samples was an integral part in Dakorien Moore now becoming an Oregon Duck. Remember, before Rashad Samples came to Oregon as the running backs coach, he did work with the wide receivers over at Arizona State. Now, recruiting, and a lot of people say this about Dan Lanning, recruiting's all about connections. It's all about relationships. I've heard people recently saying the reason why Dan Lanning is so good at this talent acquisition thing, the reason why Dan Lanning is so good at this recruiting thing, because compared to any other head coach in the country, he develops more connections and he develops more relationships with families, with recruits, etc., better than any coach in college football. And he used the relationships and the connections that Rashad Samples was able to offer in the recruitment of Dakorien Moore. Rashad Samples' dad, Reginald Samples, is the head coach at Duncanville High School. Where did Dakorien Moore come from? Where did he play his high school football? At Texas high school powerhouse, Duncanville High School. Rashad Samples became Oregon's running back coach on April 9th, 2024. Dakorien Moore decommitted from LSU on May 16th, 2024. And then Dakorien Moore committed to Oregon and never looked back in July of 2024. Rashad Samples has been a big part of Oregon extending their recruiting tentacles more into the state of Texas. I'm going to talk about him in just a little bit, but 2026 running back commit, high 4-star commit, Tredarian Ball, is a big part of that. And it's not just a running back position. They've been able to get more into Texas at some of these other positions as well. Appreciate what you have, because Rashad Samples is not going to be here for long. But we're happy to have him as long as he wants to call Eugene, Oregon, his home. I'm really, really excited about the room that Rashad Samples is going to be coaching coming up here in 2025. It is going to be really fun to watch what happens offensively with this running back room, with this run game, exactly how it's structured. I've talked about the pass game, I think, a good amount on this show. Look, you got a new quarterback. We think that Dante Moore is going to be a stud at quarterback. We don't know that, but we think that that's going to happen. Kenyon Sadiq, we think that he's going to be one of the Big Ten's top tight ends. We have a pretty good idea that Evan Stewart and Decorian Moore are going to be great passing threats within the passing game. But this is once again set to be a great to elite level Oregon run game. And when you take a look and when you throw those words around, a great to elite Oregon run game, that is the expectation at Oregon. The Ducks have had a 1,000-yard rusher in 17 of the last 20 seasons. The last full season, not including the COVID year, the last full season that the Oregon Ducks did not have a 1,000-yard rusher, you got to go all the way back to 2016 when Royce Freeman rushed for 945 yards. Tony Brooks James rushed for 771 yards. This is a program that had two 1,000-yard rushers in the same season in 2008. From 2016, you got to go to 2006. That's another 10-year gap that Oregon had 1,000-yard rushers. You got to go 10 years to find the next time when they didn't have a 1,000-yard rusher. In that year, Jonathan Stewart rushed for 981 yards and 10 touchdowns. Jeremiah Johnson rushed for 644 yards and another 10 touchdowns. So when they weren't rushing for 1,000 yards, they had as good of a 1-2 tandem in the backfield as you could ask for. And I think the Oregon Ducks in 2025 are going to continue this tradition. It is a big part, obviously, of the talent that they have in the backfield. But I think another huge part of it, of course, is this offensive line. Alik Terry has done a phenomenal job as the offensive line coach of this Oregon football team. Oregon, back-to-back Joe Moore Award finalists. You have top players being developed at Oregon. Jackson Powers Johnson was a second-round pick, drafted 44th overall. Josh Connerly in this upcoming year's draft expected to be a first-round or an early second-round draft pick. Oregon is recruiting, they are taking offensive linemen, and they are developing them into NFL players. This is a group, the offensive line, that continues to pave the way for some of the best running games in college football. And I expect the same to happen this season. I am really excited about the interior of the offensive line specifically. Of course, you've got Iapanilala Olu, also known as Pancho and Prenon, Emmanuel Prenon, transferring over from USC at one of the guard positions. Like, Oregon looked around and they said, yeah, we're losing some guys. I'm not sure if our young guys on the offensive line are quite ready to fill into some of those gaps, so we got to go to the transfer portal. And they just went out and got some of the best offensive linemen in the transfer portal. Emmanuel Prenon was one of the best interior linemen in the transfer portal. They've got, I think 2 of the top 6, something like that, tackles in the transfer portal with Isaiah World from Nevada and Alex Harkey over from Texas State as well. That other guard position, it could be Dave Ayuli, it could be Matthew Bedford. Either way, I'm really excited about the interior offensive line and the offensive line as a whole. I think it's going to be another line that's going to pave the way and certainly help this run game to be one of the best run games in the Big Ten, if not all of college football as well. Now, you lose Jordan James. Other than that, the running back room looks very similar that it did last season. Now, a kind of a little star or an asterisk that you got to put on is Noah Whittington. I don't think we've officially heard whether he is indeed officially coming back for 2025. So that's a pretty big pivot point, which I'll certainly get to in just a minute. So you lose Jordan James, and you've got, the list of running backs there if you're watching on video. If you're listening on audio, I'll certainly kind of go over these guys as the show progresses. But you lose Jordan James. You needed to go to the transfer portal to get an RB1, emphasis number 1 running back in the transfer portal in Makhi Hughes. Look, we've had Bucky Irving. We've had Jordan James in the Dan Lanning era. I think Makhi Hughes, look, he only might be here for a year, but I think Makhi Hughes has the potential to put up the best season, to be maybe the best running back of the Dan Lanning era at Oregon. He's combined for 2,779 yards and 22 touchdowns. That was his true freshman year and his true sophomore year in the group of 5 at Tulane. He's got all the skill set. He's a great combination of size and speed and power and everything that you really want, certainly in a running back. I've kind of broken down his skill set in a previous edition of TSO Dub, certainly as well. So what else can be said? I think he's going to be one of the best running backs in the Big Ten. I think he's going to be one of the best running backs in the country because of his talent and because of what I just mentioned, the offensive line that is blocking for him next season. Noah Whittington. Let's talk about him. Like we said, we don't know for certain if he is indeed going to come back for 2025. If that is incorrect, please leave it in the comments below. But I personally, I did some research and I haven't found anything that really solidifies him as completely all in for 2025. But I am going off of the basis that he is going to be back. And that is a great 1-2 tandem. And Noah Whittington with Makhi Hughes as the number one back. Noah Whittington is playing the role that he's been best at throughout his Oregon career, and that's a great 1B option for the Ducks. In 2022, he rushed for 779 yards and 5 touchdowns, backing up Bucky Irving. Of course, he had the injury in 2023. In 2024, 540 yards and 6 touchdowns, backing up Jordan James. You ask him to do something, and he is going to do it. He is a tough runner. He gets the tough yards. You know, you see it every time this show comes on the air. The Noah Whittington putting his shoulder down in the Illinois game right at the goal line and just truck sticking a guy in for a touchdown. He's that power guy. We even saw him kind of line up towards the outside and get involved in the pass game as well. He's a very versatile back, and you can put him into different situations, and he can certainly succeed. Now, let's talk about the rest of this running back room, because I think there's maybe some things that could be just a smidge different this season, and things that certainly intrigue me. Now, when we look at the running back who's going to be plugged into that number 3 role, maybe that spell back, someone that's going to be able to give not only Makhi Hughes but Noah Whittington a little bit of a breather as well. Right now, I feel really good about Dejon Riggs that he can be that guy. We saw him at the end of last season really getting more involved, and when he got on the field, look, he only got 11 carries last season, but when he got on the field, he made it count. 5 carries, 44 yards against Illinois, and I was very impressed with him in the Washington game. 6 carries, 38 yards, and a touchdown over there as well. I feel pretty confident. I feel pretty comfortable with him as the number 3 back. Like I said before, he is that diamond in the rough. He's that maybe development diamond that Rashad Samples has really done a great job with in just 1 year. I'm really excited, right? He was a 3-star true freshman last year. I'm really excited to see what the jump that he can make. If he can make a jump, now this becomes a really good rotation. If he becomes a jump and Noah Whittington is not on this team, I still feel comfortable. I still feel confident in what Dejon Riggs can bring as the number 2 running back in the system as well. Now, here's where things get a little bit tricky, and like I keep on saying, it really depends on Noah Whittington right now, but really, based on what we know, we think he's kind of in right now for Oregon for 2025. Jaden Lamar and Jay Harris certainly come up next. And when you have Hughes, when you have Whittington, when you have Riggs, both Lamar and Harris have 2 years of eligibility remaining. And I think the clock is ticking, kind of. If Whittington does indeed come back, I would be surprised if both Lamar and Jay Harris are on this roster next season. Oregon has not carried more than 6 scholarship running backs since 2018. If Lamar and if Harris are on the roster, that would be 7 scholarship running backs. And we all know the 105-man roster limit that's going to be coming up in the future as well. Oregon, we'll be talking about these young guys here in just a minute. Oregon signed 2 running backs in this past cycle, Indier Hill and Matter Day's Jordan Davison. So it would not surprise me in and of the slightest that Lamar or Harris ends up transferring out in the spring. But I feel very confident that Dejon Riggs is probably going to be above one or both of them in the depth chart entering spring practice. I'm obviously very excited about what the run game can be in 2025, but the future is also very bright in the backfield. And this thing comes full circle once again. We're going to come full circle probably multiple times. It all comes back to Rashad Samples and what he's doing from a recruiting piece and also what he's doing from a development piece. He's done a really good job in this 25 cycle, in this 26 cycle, bringing in the future of the Oregon Ducks at the running back position. Now, before I get into the future, I kind of got to talk about the talent acquisition piece in the Dan Lanning era at Oregon. Now, this next season in 2025, that will be Dan Lanning's fourth season. In those 4 seasons, they've taken 2 transfer running backs. Of course, Bucky Irving was a transfer in 2022 from Minnesota. He had back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. And, of course, they're taking Makhi Hughes to be the RB1 here in 2025. Jordan James was a recruit, and they did a really good job developing him into a 1,000-yard back as well. Now, Dan Lanning's first really full cycle in 2023. Dante Dowdell, they also signed Jaden Lamar. Dante Dowdell transferred out after 1 year. He went to Nebraska, and then from Nebraska, he's gone to Kentucky. We know, as we just talked about, Jaden Lamar still on the roster in a depth role. In 2024, Dejon Riggs from a recruiting piece. I've talked about him, and I'm really excited about him. And then Jay Harris also transferred in that season as well. 2025, Jordan Davison and De'Aaron Hill. I think you're really starting to see the running back position as of late, really starting with Dejon Riggs and going to 2025 and going to 2026 is they're doing a lot better job from a recruiting standpoint. Sometimes when a new staff comes in, look, you need to go to the portal right away to continue to play at a high level to kind of get your feet under you a little bit. Now that Oregon's feet are under them as far as running back recruiting, you kind of see you're reaping the rewards of now that you've established that foundation. You kind of know what type of back you really want to get within this Will Stein offense. Let's break down the future of the 25 running back, the two true freshmen, 25 running backs, easy for me to say, that are going to be coming in this season. And then we've got 1 running back commitment in the class of 2026. Let's start first. Mater Day kid in Jordan Davison. Boy, that is the pipeline of all pipelines. So many red and white Mater Day kids are coming in to Oregon here as of late at multiple positions. You know, when I watch his tape, I see a no-nonsense runner. I see a power running back at 6 foot, 216 pounds. You know what? One of the first things that really popped into my mind when I watched him, he's got that running back style. He's got that mid-40s dad going into the grocery store or the hardware store. He knows what he wants to get. He's going to go to that aisle. He's going to get what he wants, and he's going to get out. There is no nonsense. There's no dancing. There's no looking around for any other things in the store. He knows where he is at in point A. He knows where he's at in point B, and he takes a straight line to get there. He is very much a north and south physical type of runner. I grew up in the state of Wisconsin. I grew up watching a lot of Wisconsin Badgers football. He feels like maybe an old school north and south straight ahead Wisconsin type of runner, like someone maybe in the mold recently of like a Braylon Allen. But then I watch him and I'm like, he has a lot more explosiveness. He has that one cut, boom, ability and acceleration more than maybe some of these Wisconsin running backs certainly have. So he has that really good no-nonsense type of combination at running back. So he's got the power. And then you look at the speed. De'Aaron Hill is the guy from the state of Illinois. He was the Gatorade Illinois Player of the Year 2 consecutive years. So his junior year and his senior year. How about these numbers last year? I get it. Illinois is not the same level of competition as there is in California, right? Certainly in the Trinity League with Mater Day, and then we're going to be talking about someone from the state of Texas here in just a little bit. I get that, but still, 155 carries, 2,588 yards, and 40 touchdowns. That is insane. He has the breakaway speed. He is a track guy. He is a sprinter, the great burst, and the great acceleration certainly as well. But now when you get to 2026, This is the guy. We talked about maybe the diamond in the rough that Dejon Riggs was, the 3-star guy, and what Coach Samp is doing from a development piece with him. When you talk about finding a high-profile high school running back that this prize is, and Rashad Samples has been able to get, I think that's Tredarian Ball from the class of 2026. And really, Oregon as a whole, 2026 is their crown jewel. It is their gem of bringing in players. Now, Tredarian Ball, out of all these guys, the smallest of them, 5'10", 175 pounds. But he is an explosive weapon. We've seen him tweet, nobody can do what I can do. And, you watch his tape and it's hard to disagree with the guy. It really is. It really is. He can do it all, right? You can do a traditional run game stuff, and he can make that one cut upfield. He can get and bounce it to the outside and certainly use his speed. But I prefaced him saying he's a weapon. For Texas High School in Texarkana, Texas, they've lined him up in the slot. They've lined him up out wide. He returns kicks. He does it all. Nobody can do what I can do because he can do everything. He's the guy, I think, with the highest ceiling. I think he's the guy with the most potential of these incoming running backs in these two classes in 2025 and 2026. It is going to be really fun to watch the run game in 2025. It is going to be really fun to watch the run game in the future. Leave all your comments. Rashad Samples coming back, the 2025 run game, and the future of the run game in Oregon. Leave all your thoughts in the comments below. I'm Ted LaRue. This has been That Show Out West.